Hi, everyone. How is everybody doing? Welcome to Ion ESI. We've got about 55 people in the room. I don't know, do we want to give it a couple of seconds, just do some chit chat? I know we've had like over 100 at some times. All right, so we cannot hear you. Jill Hankey says she cannot hear us. Let's see.
I can hear you.
You can hear us? Okay.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Awesome. We can hear you. All right. Okay. Jill, I think there might be something wrong on your side because we're getting back that everyone can hear us. All right. All right. We've hit the 70 mark. So I'm just going to get us started. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to this quarter's Ion ESI. And I'm sure you have missed us. I am Maribel Rivera, Senior Director of Community Relations at ACEDS. And I am joined today, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Jared, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Team ACEDS. My name is Jared Coseglia. I am the founder and CEO of True Staffing Partners, and we specialize in eDiscovery, data privacy, and cybersecurity talent representation and staffing. We're celebrating our 12-year anniversary this month, which is crazy. 12 is a really cool and important number. 12 months, 12 apostles, 12 signs of the zodiac. So a very exciting year of maturity and growth and stability for us here at True. We've got a really amazing team behind us, and we're excited to share all of our perspective on the eDiscovery and data privacy and cybersecurity job market with everybody here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Mike, your turn.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Mike Quartararo. I am the president of ACEDS, recovering law firm director, eDiscovery, and project management specialist, I think, or something like that. And I'm excited to talk about Eyes on ESI.
All right. So for everyone returning, thank you for joining us again. This is our, I think, fourth or fifth. This is our fifth one, I believe. We've been doing these every quarter. I think we did 2 last quarter. So if you have been enjoying them, that's awesome. It says in the chat, Jared seems to have frozen. Of the 3 of you, he's the only one frozen. He seems to be, okay, he's back. All right. So this is how Ion ESI is very different. It's not a webinar. This is engaging conversation. The rules are Mike, Jared, and I will be having some conversations. We'll start you off with some of the trends that are happening in eDiscovery and adjacent spaces, but you can join us on camera. You can ask questions in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can, raise your virtual little hand emoji icons, whatever you want to do. But the goal is to really engage and answer the questions that you have, and provide you as much information as we can based on our knowledge of the industry and hiring practices, learning paths, and other things. So we're going to get started. Did we lose Mike? All right. You're back. You're not allowed to go off camera.
I was trying to find a picture of what I looked like before the pandemic.
Oh, okay. I thought you were looking for a picture of what you looked like before you became a director of litigation management. No. All right. So I want to kick us off talking about trends in hiring. And some of what I usually see. Well, you know what? Let's go back a little bit. I want to talk about trends that you're seeing, Jared, in the space as far as eDiscovery and any of the adjacent fields that we work with.
Yeah, so let's talk about the things that are the same everywhere in terms of eDiscovery, data privacy, and cybersecurity. The first round interviews are still 100% virtual. So we haven't had a first round interview in an office in over a year. All of that is going to stay the same. We don't see that changing. We don't see customers saying, we really want people to come in, meet them before we go any further. It's just not the case. It's going to be at most the final interview. And we really only found 10% of interviews last year across our entire spectrum, from executive level all the way down to entry level. Only 10% of candidates actually had a physical in-office, in-person interview before getting an offer extended to them. So even if they were expected to come in an office as part of the job. So we don't see that changing. And the main reason we don't see that changing is really expedience. To get calendars coordinated where everyone can physically be in one space for anything, much less a first round interview, just doesn't make sense in terms of the timeline to hire. That's the second thing that hasn't changed and isn't going to change, at least as far as we could see, for the next 6 months, at least in eDiscovery 6 months. And that speed of hire is about 8 to 12 business days for a mid-market professional, a project manager, an analyst, a forensic examiner. It's about 3 weeks at the executive level. For contract professionals, it's anywhere from 48 to 72 hours from the time you submit a resume to the time they get a contract offer. So that's how fast the market moves. People don't have time to go into an office for a first round interview.
So wait a second, I want to understand this.
Meeting in person at all.
I want to understand this. You are, from the time a resume is submitted, someone looks at it, to hire or to interview, 8 to 21 days, depending upon level of.
From resume submission to offer extended. That's how we measure that. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So it's about 8 to 12 days. It's actually elongated a little bit in January. It was 8 days at the end of December for like an eDiscovery project manager. It's actually now 12, which is about 3 weeks. It's about 2.5 weeks, of business days. And the reason for that is simply because it took the market the first like 2 weeks of January to really get up and running again, because everybody took the entire week of Christmas to New Year's off because they fell on the weekend. So that it was a dead week. I mean, we literally at True shut down the company, gave everybody the week off because there's just nothing happening. Nobody was responsive to anything. And for every day you take off of work, it takes 3 days to get back in gear. So it took us a couple weeks in January to see the market, you start interviewing again at the pace that they were interviewing at the end of the year. But we are definitely back on pace.
So just for comparison, and for those who are either not seeking jobs or not in the recruiting business, pre-pandemic, what was that timeline like?
Yeah, it was about 3 to 6 weeks for a project manager, and it was 3 to 6 months for an executive.
That's incredible.
And now it's much shorter. And part of that is also because we were going into offices for first round interviews. And part of that was also because clients would take days to respond to a resume submission. They could take their sweet time before the pandemic, before they decided they wanted to see a candidate. You wait 3 days, you're already behind the curve. That candidate's already been interviewed by 3 other companies if they're actively interviewing, and that moment of ignition has already occurred. So we're getting responses from clients within minutes of sending a net new resume, which is wonderful and very unusual and unlikely to change no matter what vertical that you're in.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Question for you on that is, are you seeing, because in Q4 and I think in Q3, we were also seeing that there was little bit of, let me say it correctly, there was not enough candidate pool, but a lot of jobs still trying to hire. Are we still seeing the same, or is there a shift?
Yes and no. There are still more jobs than there are active job seekers to fill those jobs, right? Take a step back. We found that 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 employees left their job at our eDiscovery customers last year, which means whether you're a law firm, lit support department, a corporate in-house eDiscovery department, or a vendor or consulting firm, you lost 25 to 33% of your staff last year. That's the average, right? So people are turning over a lot of people. That's a lot of movement. That's a lot of movement, a whole lot of movement. Those same people are not going to be looking for jobs this year. So now take the job market and cut it by a third, because a third of people already changed jobs if you're looking for full-time hires in 2021. So now you're left with 2/3 of the market. A third of those people are not actively on the market. You'd be lucky if the other whole third were actively on the market. Then you start whittling things down in terms of in-office policies, vaccine policies, We just had a candidate come to us today who left their job because they didn't want to get vaccinated and are now looking only for jobs that will require a vaccination. And it goes all different directions, and you're slowly whittling down the pool of people that are going to be right for your needs. Now you need them to come into an office. Now you need them to come into an office in San Francisco and be vaccinated 5 days a week. You're looking at maybe like 25 people in the market. So you're either in a waiting game for that person to become available and or interested, you're bussing in people, relocating people because of policy, or you're changing your policy. And that's the third thing that everybody, regardless of vertical, is doing, which is companies are compromising. Companies are compromising on all sorts of things. We'll let them be in whatever state they want to be in. We'll hire contractors so that we can run payroll through someone else in a different state. We'll lower our expectations, and they don't need to have these 3 skill sets. Just give us someone with this. We will eliminate our we had a law firm, major law firm, top 20, eliminate their vaccine mandate last week in order to open up the talent pipeline. So remember, I think it was in the 3rd quarter, we talked about this artery, and the more you clog that artery, the less candidates are going to be available in your pipeline. Well, we're still seeing companies do this and do this. What's interesting is we're seeing candidates do the opposite now, which is close their artery and be more demanding and expect more compensation and want more flexibility. And that tension is what's creating a stalemate. And that's why for every 1 project manager, there are 6 to 7 open requisitions in eDiscovery.
So that leads us to one of the questions from someone who's joining us today. What's the proportion of PM offers to executive offers?
The executive offers are less than 5% of the marketplace, and most of them involve sales and business development. The project manager market for eDiscovery, let's call it, consultant, individual contributor consultant, not managing a team, all the way to, let's call it, analyst with 3 years experience in eDiscovery processing data, and everything in between. That's the hottest segment of the market. That's 75–80% of the job.
So let's break that down a little bit too, Jared. So let's segment that by law firm, corporate, government, vendor.
Yeah, let's leave government on its own, because the magnitude of some of those projects probably makes them disproportionately comparable. There are lots of government jobs. Most of them require you to be in an office 5 days a week. If they're federal, they require you to be in Washington, D.C. And that piece of it has made it very, very difficult for government customers to get top talent, and very, very difficult to compromise on some of the things that other verticals like law firms, corporations, vendors, and consulting firms are willing to compromise on, like office policies, like vaccine policies. There's all sorts of different regulations that they're beholden to that other companies are not. And so they are having the hardest time right now staffing the marketplace.
Okay. Government on the side, what else?
So a question for you there is, even breaking that down even further, how many, because we do have questions about international, right? But what are you seeing internationally versus US?
Yeah, 80% of the jobs are in North America, most of them in the United States. There's smatterings of jobs throughout Canada, mostly in Toronto, although we're seeing, Quebec and Vancouver and other areas, have pops of opportunity. But paralegals still do a lot of the work in eDiscovery in Canada from our experience, and are really doing what we would consider eDiscovery work for a lot of their customers, and particularly at law firms. Europe has a lot of opportunity, mainly in Germany and in the UK and in Ireland. That's where most of the jobs are. We're seeing more people open up and be flexible, but data privacy laws are very different there. And so the locality of the data and the person wielding the data has relevance, where it's a little different here in the United States in terms of, across state flexibility. It's still not a huge piece of the job market. A lot of the work is being done here in the States, but there are still a number of jobs in Europe, mostly at the project management and forensic level. Things tend to lean a little further left in Europe, where they want you to have that forensic experience coupled with eDiscovery downstream into review. APAC, pops, but 80% is going to be in the United States. The way we litigate is different.
Yeah, I do like that you mentioned forensics, because I know here at ACEDS, we've had a large number of people from the forensic side, even forensic companies, reach out to us now to talk more about eDiscovery. So I'd love for you to touch a little bit on that. And Mike, I don't know if you have any thoughts on as far as that when it comes to forensics and why they're now looking at eDiscovery more and more.
Well, I certainly have thoughts on why that is the case, because it's the linchpin. If you don't get it right when you're collecting data, your whole eDiscovery process can be screwed up. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the job market. So,
well, look, I'll give you a couple interesting stats. We get more applicants through our job portals that are forensic professionals than anything else. A lot of them are postgraduates that are trying to figure out how to get into the business and are realizing that data collection or forensic analysis is not going to be the fastest pathway to employment, and that eDiscovery is actually a much faster pathway to employment, because people are more willing to groom and train someone to be an eDiscovery coordinator than they are to send somebody in to collect data that's right out of college. So there's a back way into getting more forensic oriented, and that back way is to get good at eDiscovery. So we encourage a lot of those entry-level forensics people, if any of them are on this call, to, yes, it does not devalue what you learned in college, but I can tell you right now that I don't have any customers that are willing to let somebody fresh out of school that's never worked in the private sector come and collect documents at an enterprise level from one of their customers. Not going to happen. So you've got to find another way in the door to add value. I want to go back to the question that you asked about law firms, vendors, and corporations.
yeah.
Yeah, because they're asking for it. So
yeah, so law firms are about 30% of the job market. Vendors are about 65%. Vendors, consulting firms, let's put them together, are about 65%, and corporations are, you know, about 5%, maybe 10% of the job market. The reality is that most corporations are still promoting from within, and you're going to find that most corporations want forensics people more than they want eDiscovery people, right? Because they're doing self-collection, they're pushing that work, particularly in a managed service capacity, out to third-party vendors, which is why all the jobs are going to the vendors, because corporations and law firms are getting into MSAs where the heavy lifting in terms of processing, hosting, production, and review are being done by a third party. Now they're even outsourcing their entire legal department, legal ops, you know, the way GE and DXC did with United Lex. And you know, you look at Epic Systems is, you know, looking to grow to be a $2 billion company, and they're in that space now, like aggressively in that business legal transformation space, where they're seconding entire legal departments, getting that downstream eDiscovery revenue, yes, but whole new streams of revenue in governance, legal operations, staffing, all sorts of other things.
You used the phrase seconding. What does that mean?
So we're essentially, the employees are on the payroll of an external third-party agency and are more or less the full-time employees fully dedicated to the end customer through some sort of subscription-based or managed service contract that includes talent as part of its core offering.
Yeah, I like to be clear because not everybody knows. That's kind of a term that's used a lot at law firms. Law firms do a lot of seconding to their clients. They need a lawyer in-house, and the law firm happens to be working with the corporation, and they'll send them a lawyer temporarily, but they'll still be on the law firm payroll. It's a common practice, but I just wanted to be clear so everybody on the call today could understand.
But now that extends beyond lawyers in the legal function, right? In legal ops, in eDiscovery, we're seeing secondment that has nothing to do with the actual practice of law, but functions in essentially the same modality. And they're not going to the law firm to do it. They're going to a third-party vendor to do it.
I'm seeing that as well. It's interesting that I've got friends who are doing that right now. They're in that role. And so I wanted to unpack one thing really quick, and that is that 5% that's sort of corporate, right? And so do you think it's the idea that legal ops, if you will, is such a, it's broader than just eDiscovery. There's so much going on inside a corporate legal department. So when we talk about legal ops, we're not just talking about eDiscovery. So anybody interested,
we're not talking about eDiscovery at all.
Yeah, it's like really low on their list of priorities. They've got all kinds of.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's not legal ops. It's not eDiscovery at all. Most of them don't even compartmentalize it, right? Like eDiscovery falls under a different reporting structure at most corporations, right? Sometimes it's still just under IT. But it's definitely not legal ops. I mean, legal ops is really focused on running the business of the legal department and cost efficiency, which of course in-house eDiscovery is about. But it's I mean, maybe for some of the highly cyclically litigious, but I think in general, it is considered a separate line item and addressed with third-party vendor solutions to make it most cost-effective, or cloud solutions to make it most cost-effective, as opposed to building an internal function, which is why there are no jobs there.
So we have a question in the chat. Any advice, and this, this falls under project management, but falls under some of the things that we wanted to talk about today too, as far as interviewing. So any advice for employers who need to fill project management roles and need to screen candidates quickly? Any red flags to rule out in a candidate at a first interview? And I'm going to say you probably have to step back and rule a candidate out before you even get to that interview process, right?
Well, look, I'm going to kind of tongue-in-cheek answer that question by saying, well, you should call my organization. But the reason why it's tongue-in-cheek and also kind of serious is because, I think people misunderstand the value of a third-party agency in staffing, and they think of it as identifying talent, right? Most internal human resource recruiters think, we got to engage True. We hate to do it. We got to pay them a fee because they got to find us somebody. But the reality is that's not our value, and a good agency isn't going to be their value. And you're going to see where I'm going with this in a second. The value is influence. The value is persuasion. The value is years and years of relationship and how that affects people's decisions. That's why you're paying for our services. 90% of what we do is that. 10% is just figuring out who the people are. We know who most of the people are in eDiscovery, right? We're just trying to represent them to the right people at the right time. And that's a complicated web. But it's the same advice I'm going to give you when you're looking for referrals. What you want is somebody that's going to help you influence a candidate. You don't have the luxury of ruling people out because you see a typo on their resume, or there's something on their LinkedIn that doesn't quite add up. You've got to be very forgiving as an employer right now and be open-minded to seeing as many people as you can, because you may not get your first or second choice, particularly if you're looking for an eDiscovery project manager or an analyst, because we found in 2021, every one of those people had 3 offers at the time of changing jobs. 3 offers as an average, right? Some of them had like 6. 3 as an average, right? Minimum 2, average 3. And that doesn't include counter offers from current employers. And yes, you are definitely up against that more now than you were in the 3rd and 4th quarter, because employers are sick of turning over talent. So yes, they are throwing money and all sorts of other things, compromises, as we discussed, at existing employees, not just incoming hires, in order to retain them. So that is an obstacle you've got to deal with. So my advice to you is to be very open-minded, talk to a lot of people, trust your instincts, and look for candidates where you have somebody who can influence them, who has some influence over them, that can advocate your brand, whether it's a referral, whether it's a friend, whether it's a former colleague that they work with that can put in a good word for you. Where are you going to get advantage to influence the candidate to say yes to you? That would be my advice.
So let me ask something here. So for anybody who on the call today that's thinking about looking for a new job, walk me through not just the timeline, but sort of what the expectation is. Submit a resume tomorrow, expect a call immediately, and a video interview in 2-3 days, an offer in 6 to 10 days. Is that realistic?
I mean, I tell people they better be ready. You better be ready. Yeah, you better be ready. This is what's going to happen once we go, right? And I'll say the same. It's probably even hyperbole for a solid eDiscovery sales professional. We warned them, right? And we hit this point in the 3rd quarter last year where my whole team had this problem of like, I think we're losing candidate engagement from some people because we're overwhelming them, right? I didn't have 2 or 3 jobs that might be right for this person. Yeah. I had 15, and we've got to scale that back. We've got to curate for people better than just showing them everything that they might be right for, and really guide, here's what's best for you and why. And here's why we want you to look at these 3 to 5 as opposed to the 25 that technically you would be right for, right? And that, from a candidate perspective, also has a lot of value, we think, because who wants to go on 15 interviews? You don't want to go on 15 interviews. You want to go on 3 to 5. But if you're not ready to move that fast, it's dangerous to go at the market full throttle, because what may happen is you pull back and you miss out on that great opportunity because they had to move that fast, because if they don't, they're going to lose that other person if you're not ready to move quickly. So yeah, you got to be ready to go to market. And the advice I always give candidates is you go to market right now and you jump in the deep end of the water. You don't tip your toe in the shallow end and feel out the market, because there's too much out there. You want to jump in, make a big splash, and get out and have 5 offers in your hand in 2 business weeks.
It's not for the curious.
I mean, it can be, but the problem with that is you lose out on an opportunity, because while you're taking your sweet time, that client has now accepted the realities of the marketplace and they're moving that fast.
Right.
A lot of them don't want to wait, right? And we've had that happen multiple times. It's a lot.
Truly fascinating. So on the corporate side, what can a hiring manager do to help filter that process better? Is it about job description? Is it about role? Is it about how can they help facilitate that process better?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to the advice I gave before. Start with who you know. Start with who you know. If you're gonna try to recruit on your own, start with who you know. And it's the same advice I give the job seeker. If you're gonna go and try to go to market with your career without a talent agency behind you, start with who you know. Because that vouching and credibility in most industries, but definitely in eDiscovery, and even more so right now in data privacy, we'll come back to that question we had at the beginning of this call, which is what's happening in that world, which we didn't get to. But even more so in that industry, and I would say even more so in cybersecurity, who you know has huge value to your future employer. Man, huge value.
Okay, we've got some additional questions. I want to jump to a different question. So is the North American market so volatile due to the notice periods? UK, EU, we normally have 3 to 6 months, but you do some things in the UK and EU. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a great observation, actually, whoever's question that is. It's a great observation, right? People, if they can solve if they're a global entity and they can solve their problem by staffing in North America in 2 to 4 weeks versus having to wait 3 months in the UK for a localized resource, they're going to do it. And we see a lot of our global law firms solving problems that way, hiring people in second and third shifts that work international follow the sun hours in order to accommodate that kind of 24/7 client responsiveness. They're based in Kansas City, they're working in the UK. It is what it is, but we do see that happening. I don't think that's the primary reason, though. The primary reason there are less jobs there is because you guys just don't litigate like we litigate here in the United States. And most of the real eDiscovery jobs in even the UK, but certainly throughout Europe, have a global capacity, right? Like the project managers and analysts and forensic examiners we're placing on projects in Stuttgart and Dusseldorf are working on things at banks or automakers or these global entities where it touches all 4 corners of the earth, and as a result allows for staffing in all 4 corners of the earth.
Next question is, what can managers, executives do to make themselves more appealing, especially to law firms or corporate legal departments? And I think that's an excellent question. So what's the feedback there? And Mike, you've hired quite a few people, and what would you do? So let me start off with Mike, and then we'll go to Jared to finish us off and give us some expertise there.
So what was the question? I'm sorry.
What can managers, executives do to make themselves more appealing? What would you provide as far?
For me, it's always about sort of uncovering who the person is as an authentic, like if I'm hiring for a manager, I'm looking for who are they as a leader, who are they as a person, what are their interests, what keeps them up at night, what are their strengths. Sort of line workers are kind of you approach them a little bit differently. You look at the tasks and try to align their skills and talents with those tasks. That's how I always kind of approach it. I'm kind of out of the game for a bit, and I only did hiring at law firms, so it's a little bit, I think, a different equation. And the market has so changed, as Jared has pointed out, that I'm not even sure some of the things that I focused on when I was looking to fill a very specific role usually. I'm not even sure that I would look at it the same way in the current market because you have to move quickly. So I think you find short circuits. Believe it or not, I always kind of looked at the technology piece of this as, don't worry, I can teach you the technology. So that's not a big thing. I was looking for sort of core talent and skill sets, ways of thinking. I'm very process oriented myself. So I look for a process oriented person who can unpack things and break things down and get tasks done that lead to bigger projects and of course, client success. So that's kind of how I think about it. But again, footnote or caveat, I think the market has changed so much since I made hiring decisions that I would just approach it a little bit differently today.
So I'm going to put a pin in what you said because I want Jared to touch on that. And then I want to talk about, because, you know, I do a lot of research before I come on this webinar. And I'll tell you what a lot of industries are saying they're doing as far as hiring.
Well, I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently as it specifically relates to eDiscovery executives. And let's call those people who are, you know, at the director level or above at a vendor consulting firm, or a lit support manager or higher at a law firm, you know, corporate eDiscovery manager or higher at a corporation. And I think you've got three options. The first of which is you wait around for someone to leave their job or die. Second of which is you reinvent yourself into a tertiary discipline or pick up additional responsibilities that fall under your purview, like data privacy. Or the third is you move into sales. And people will chuckle at the third one, but it is a real problem in our industry, the volume of sales professionals out there. And people expect very sophisticated salespeople in eDiscovery, very consultative salespeople in eDiscovery. That only comes with experience. And they expect people to be likable and responsive as their sales professionals, right? They like to be able to pick up the phone and get me when they need me. And so, you know, the way to make more money is to find a way to monetize your network of relationships and your years of experience and become a consultative eDiscovery sales professional. And that will mean taking several steps back to take several huge leaps forward. But if you're really looking to monetize your decades of experience, the likelihood is you're waiting for one of those three modalities to trigger in order for you to have opportunity. Because there ain't much out there for leadership in eDiscovery if you don't fall into one of those three buckets.
I want to just touch on some of that because I think that, right, those are some of what I've been reading is about learning and career pathways and how companies are investing in their employees to reskill them and redeploy them in different areas, which comes back to like looking at different areas where you may not have always traditionally thought you would fall. So like being a salesperson or a consultant, right, of some sort, right? Sales engineering, any of those. I think those are some of the things that companies are looking at right now and investing and employees want, just based on what the research and the trends that I've been seeing, the HR trends I've been reading from within the industries. So a lot of what they said, Mike, falls into where you were talking about is creating coaching for power skills, like how to teach them to lead, working in teams, collaborate, communicate, how to tell stories, which a lot of people don't know how to tell the story, right? Jared, you and Mike tell some amazing stories, and I don't think people always know. And I'm going to put you guys I'm putting Jared to the test because
Theater major though. I mean, you know,
yeah, it's easy for him. But I do so for anyone who doesn't know, Jared is joining, and Mike and myself are all part of the US Law eDiscovery Conference in March. And Jared has 8 minutes to present 24 slides, 20 seconds each slide. So it is a test to see how good a storyteller he is, if you don't know. But some of the power coaching skills that they're trying to teach to help with pathways is, you know, part of that. How to lead, how to work in teams, collaborate, communicate, tell stories, and think strategically. So companies are looking at what are the things that we need to do to develop the talent, right? Either the talent we currently have and reskill them, because they may not have those talents, or to bring in new talent and teach them how to lead forward. So I think that's some of what I'm seeing. And that goes into a little bit of what we're talking about as far as when you start to look at companies and what they're doing to keep talent or bring in new talent. How are they doing that? What are they doing to develop that? We did touch a little bit before this on company culture. And I think we want to talk a little bit about that, because quite often people say, tell me about your company culture. We talked about this about as far as an interview question, right? When a candidate is asked, do you have any questions for us? And they might say, well, tell me a little bit about your company culture. What would be your response to that?
Oh, the worst question. Because if you ask 100 people at a company, you're going to get 100 different answers to that question. And I think, you know, what I always say to job seekers, let me answer that first, and then I'll walk back to investment in people. You know, what are you really trying to find out? What are you really trying to suss out by asking about company culture? And my recommendation is to actually ask those questions, some of which are hard questions to ask. Things like, what's the average amount of hours that a project manager works at your organization, you know, on a weekly basis? And you're going to learn a couple of things from that answer. One, well, how many is the average hour? Two, how quickly can they come up with that? Do they know that? Are they running that metric? Is that something that they're watching and observing based on the speed at which they can answer that question, right? And C, do they get defensive about it? Well, what, are you afraid to work a lot of hours, right? You know, that is going to tell you more about the company culture than asking somebody about company culture. And I think a lot of people ask about culture when they really mean hours. So instead, ask what you really want to know. Sometimes people ask about culture. What they're really looking for is, what's the mentorship plan here? How are you investing in your employees? Is it formalized training? Is it a certain kind of shadowing? Is it giving them access to things that they may not have access to in terms of learning and watching or participating professionally, right? When you come to work in my organization, almost every single person that works for me gets access to me to some degree, right? And participates with me in the growth and strategy of the business, from our newest entry-level hires all the way to, you know, our C-level executives. And so that's a value proposition to come and work for my organization. You're going to get to really work with a CEO hands-on. You're not going to get to do that. You got to work for AT&T. So, you know, what is it that you're really looking for? And find ways to put voice behind the things that you really want to find out, because that's actually the way that you'll find out about culture, not by asking people to find voice for their culture, because most people don't know how to vocalize it. I'll pause there for a second.
Mike, anything from you?
I don't quite know what to add to that, except that just culture is so unique to every organization. And like Jared said, if you ask half a dozen people at an organization what their culture is, they're going to get a half dozen answers. To me, it's all about investing in the people. I don't care where you work. The people are what make any operation run. You can have the greatest technology in the world if you don't have people, you know. And culture to me is like what the work environment is like. Are people breathing down your neck, or are you given resources and you go do your job? Does your organization support, you know, the wellness of its people, or are they just like, get the work done, we don't care how, you know? So it so varies dramatically that it's hard to have that conversation. And it's certainly not a good question to ask on an interview if you're seeking a job. I think there are ways you can nip around the edges of that, like Jared alluded to, and get to some of the answers you want to, but you have to be thoughtful about it and conscious of the reactions you're going to get, because any one of those questions could be a turnoff to a hiring manager.
So I think the next question I'm going to ask from our attendees has a little bit to do with this also. I think the younger generations, right? We're a little older. So, but the younger generations don't have problems asking those questions, right? So how do you
I'm going to disagree with that. I do find they have problems asking those questions because they don't know how to ask them with the right vernacular and tone.
Got it.
I do think they're not afraid to ask them, I think is what you're saying. And I agree with you there. They have a fear. The Gen Z has a fearlessness with putting their table stakes right on their sleeve, right? And it's a beautiful thing about that generation to some extent, but I do think that they struggle with finding the most professionally business mature way to articulate what they're looking for. And that, quite frankly, if you learn that art, is how you stand out from your peers.
There's a great book on all this stuff, and I highly recommend it to anybody who's either hiring or frankly, if you're seeking jobs. And the book is simply called Who. It's by a guy named Jeffrey Smart and Randy Street. It's a great book for anyone who's into people problems. It's a great book.
It is a great book. When I worked at the Cowan Group, it was one of the required readings that we had for all new hires. Excellent. So we did have another question, and this kind of falls in place with younger generations again, right? So one of our questions, and this has been top question for us over the last year as we're doing this, because it always comes back to hybrid, right? So some of the older generations may have some difficulty working hybrid or totally remote because of the interaction, right? You have a lack of interaction, whereas professional younger generations may not have that challenge as much. Although I do feel like sometimes the younger generation, I do find a lot of introverts in that younger generation still. But how do you see them in, how do the younger generations go about their professional lives without too much human interaction? And I'm going to start with, that's probably because this whole younger generation is based in video games and apps to like connect with people and everything else. But what's your thought?
I mean, I'm biased, and I'll say I'm biased because True has been virtual since our inception 12 years ago. And so, I mean, I'm 43. I do not understand this notion of a sense of intimacy, honesty, or authenticness being only attainable through physical proximity. I don't get it. I don't think my customers subscribe to that anymore based on the decision-making that's happening on interview processes and the compromising that's happening at a more rapid rate for letting people work virtually from home. I don't get it. I kind of feel like the older generation is gonna catch up or be replaced. And it may take decades for that to happen, but this is the new normal. Work flexibility is gonna be what people expect, number one, from their jobs in the future for as long as we can see down the road. It is not gonna change. And so I think everybody just needs to catch up and get with the times. Look, having said that, I will say this to you. As an employer, you have to be deliberate in creating outlets for your employees to interact physically, particularly the younger ones, because they do still want that. But don't underestimate the value of a moment, right? There's this idea that, well, seeing each other once a quarter or once a year isn't enough, it won't be enough. And I'll argue, like, it absolutely can be. It could be more than enough. Make those moments count and make them really meaningful, and will carry as much weight as whatever the accumulation of moments are around the water cooler 5 days a week.
I mean, I definitely see, I'm an ambivert, so I need human interaction every so often, even though when I tell Mike I'm going out into the world, he's like, why are you going out in the world? But for me, I need that human interaction, but I also can, work alone and not have it. So I kind of understand the question. It does sometimes feel like you're always in the house, you're always working remotely, but like you said, you have to figure out, how do you have your team connect, right? How do you have other employees within other interdepartmental, right, as well, not just within that team, but within other departments, because that goes back to creating a better company culture. How do you do that?
Not even better, just what is it, right? I mean, when people come to work for my organization, we're pretty clear about how often they're going to see people physically. And if that, isn't something they're comfortable with, they shouldn't come work here, because that's not going to change, right? That is part of our culture, and where we work and how we work, and the mix of virtual versus in person is definitely defining of what the work experience of being an employee here is like. And so, look, you got to be honest about these policies. So maybe my advice to employers too, Maribel and Mike, is know what your policies are and put those up in front of candidates before you even interview them, because that's a very quick way to whittle down the pile, right? Like if you're in office 5 days a week and you're not telling people that until you're actually on a video conference with them, interviewing them for the job, you've wasted a lot of time. You should be filtering your people out based on certain criterias around vaccine, mask, in office versus work from home policies. You have to, because it's only going to deter someone from reconsidering working for you if you don't bring that up prior to exploring their candidacy. It's off-putting, right? I'm on my second or third interview, and all of a sudden now you're telling me that I got to be in the office or that the policy is about to change. Why didn't you tell me that at the beginning of the process? You don't have room to have some kind of misstep and cause a candidate to take another offer for that reason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really important that you be transparent about that up front, because I think the new reality is a hybrid workforce that has a little bit more flexibility. And yeah, I guess there is some human contact component to the workforce. There's something to be said about the water cooler conversation, or that interaction, or just
5 days a week. I mean, Mike, I'll argue you. I think it's insane. We do not need to be in offices 5 days a week.
I'm advocating for a hybrid environment, right? So there's something to be said for that human contact from time to time. I just don't think it's absolutely essential. I think that a lot of what I used to accomplish by walking down the hall, I can do by a Teams call or a Zoom call. But there's something about that human, it's our social nature, and not everybody thinks like that, and that's fine. But there's something that the most important thing, bottom line, is get connected with your employees. Get connected with what's of interest to them. What do they need to do their job? What challenges, what resources, understanding where they're coming from and how you can help them. As a leader in any business space, I think that's part of what you have to do, whether you're in the office or remote, and just connect with them in some way. I don't care if it's on the phone. It's just necessary to understand who works for you.
I mean, Mike, not to be argumentative, but it's just fun to disagree just because I love you so much. But I think a lot of people on this call would say, yeah, my attorney's going to call me and really care about what I think about my work from home flexibility and really ask me to involve myself, lit support analyst, in law firm policy and politics. Like, get out of here. I can't even get him to come to me when a hard drive lands on his desk. So I think that might be an unrealistic expectation. And what I would say is this. If you're preaching efficiency, whether it's cost or time, as an employer, and then creating policies that lead to inefficiency for your employees, that dissonance is going to lead to attrition. End stop. And the reality is some things are better done in an office and can be more efficient that way, but there are definitely other things that are better done remotely and are more efficient that way. And employees see the unwillingness to adapt, regardless of age or status within any organization, as a flaw in the organization. And that just gives them one more reason to look elsewhere.
And I would only push back in this one sort of light way. We're not robots, right? And so if you have absolutely no connection to your job or the people that work there, how do you expect loyalty to develop? How do you expect the sort of customer service that you would look for to develop? It just that comes from connection with other human beings. You can't be a robot. I guess somebody working in a server room somewhere, loading data, I guess that's less human contact, but I don't know. It's a mixed bag. I don't have the answer yet. I think we'll know in a few years.
All right.
Next question, please.
All right. So let's see. Let's see. Is there another? So yeah, there is a great question here, just based on all of that. Should the over 40 stay put and leave the candidate pool to Gen Z? I'm going to say no, because I'm over 40 and I would never tell anyone to stay put if they want to move.
it's not about age. It's about the job that you want, right? And when I say there's not a lot out there for executives, it's not exclusive to people over the age of 40. I know plenty of people who are in their mid 30s that are kind of stuck because they were wunderkind and they moved up really fast in their career. And now there's not a lot of options for them in terms of things that will meet their salary requirements, right? It's the salary requirements that make it difficult for executives in eDiscovery to move because there aren't a lot of jobs at that salary requirement. And let's call that at, 250 plus in base compensation. It's a much thinner market for job opportunities at that level, which is how we get back to sales, reinvention, people leaving their jobs or dying.
Well, do you think that everyone in an office should have some kind of capability around sales, some kind of business development? For me, I always think people should have some type of business development skills internally for internal or external work.
Yeah, I mean, the power of persuasion is a humanity, right? It's not exclusive to people who are responsible for generating revenue. And I think it's probably the most important skill that a person can learn in the business world. So, to that extent, yes. But I do think there comes a different kind of lifestyle from being a person who generates revenue for an organization and a different kind of, let's call it acquiescence to, the end, right? The end goal and the end result, which is to transact, which is to some extent very black and white, versus people who are influencers in other organizations for other things other than revenue, where it's not so black and white, where it's not so easy to say, this is how we're going to measure your success in dollars and cents. Whereas for a salesperson, it's a very calculatable way to measure their success. And that's a different kind of work, experience.
Next question. Can Jared provide references to salary surveys or give an overview of salaries that can be commanded in large firms versus mid-size for eDiscovery directors and project managers?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any real difference between mid-size and big firms anymore, right? It's just the caliber of talent that you're looking for, and the price is going to be the same no matter what your size is. Senior project managers at law firms were moving at 145 to 185 in base compensation, right? That's the top of the market for law firm project managers. In consulting firms, vendors, it comes down a little bit in base comp, but sometimes the bonuses can be more lucrative and make the total comp better than what you would see at a law firm. For people that are in leadership levels, like directors and managers of lit support, generally they're 200 plus in base compensation at law firms. Some of them significantly higher. There's some that are significantly higher. Those people have likely gotten to that salary rate because they've stayed in their jobs and been promoted and gotten raises over time. The point of hire at a law firm for a director or manager is probably somewhere in the low 200s in lit support. And it's rare that you see those jobs available in the marketplace. For a PM, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for a PM, like mid-level PM, let's call it 3 to 5 years experience. Those are people are generally in the $100 to $125,000 a year base salary. For coordinator level or senior analyst, different jobs, same salary. Usually those are non-exempt at law firms at 80 to 120. At vendors, usually 80 to 100 with some kind of bonus. And for analysts, things scale down from there. We don't see a lot of entry-level hires in eDiscovery anymore. Ultimately, customers are just not really willing to wait to train. People want plug-and-play skills. There are exceptions to that rule, but it's a small percentage of the marketplace at entry level. And entry level usually pays like $45,000 to $55,000 a year. Non-exempt at law firms, exempt at vendors, sometimes a little bit more at vendors.
No, it sounds like ACEDS and Truth should put a salary survey together.
Not a survey. I don't believe in surveys, and there are a lot of surveys out there, and there's good reason why I didn't name any of them, because they are exactly that. They go to market, they ask what people are making, and people tell them the information, and then they publish it. That is not real information. The information I just gave you is what our clients are actually hiring people at the point of hire, and we are privy to that because we are negotiating their salaries. That's real data. Sorry.
That's okay. No
I feel real strongly about that. I will say one thing,
well,
though.
we won't say then that our ACEDS did a Canadian salary survey.
It's a survey. It's you are trusting they're giving you accurate information, and I'm telling you, people don't. And I know this because they tell us what they're actually making because they want more when they move their jobs. And I will say this, the one survey I found for data privacy that I do think is very reputable, and it is a survey, but it is very reputable, is the IAPP salary survey. I think they get very honest answers from their constituents, and the data that they provide matches what we're seeing happen in the marketplace.
I don't think it's always about precise numbers either. I think salary bands are a good approach to inquiries like that. So if you find, and people just want information, right? And it's just not publicly available. There are tons of organizations that will charge you, hand over foot for an actual salary base. But I mean, do they even include eDiscovery project manager?
Yeah, but here's my problem with the survey, Mike. Let's be honest. The problem with the survey is it comes out and that's what people think they have to pay. And the reality is they have to pay 22% more than that because that's what people are making right now. And we found that last year, people got 22% on an average, a 22% increase in base compensation at the point of moving jobs. That was an average for last year through the whole year, 22%. So those surveys send a false message to the marketplace, to hiring managers, that this is what it will cost for me to acquire talent. And then I have to spend time undoing that work, explaining them that no, that's what people are making, not what it's going to take to get them to leave their jobs. So that's the addendum to a salary.
I think there's a component of that that's time-based, right? Surveys take time, putting it together takes time. So by the time the number actually hits the market, it's 6 months, it's stale already, right?
100%.
So I think that's part of it. But I mean, just from my travels in my career, I know HR directors go to these paid books. They're literally a published book.
And then they go to bat and they get approvals for salaries that don't get the job done.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point.
All right, 2 more questions. Because we're almost out of time. eDiscovery PM, which is the better for career growth, vendor versus law firm? This we've answered quite a few times, but.
Growth is relative. It depends on how you want to grow, right? I mean, it could be a great growth track to go to a law firm as a PM. You could go spend 10 years being a PM, senior PM, consultant at a law firm, and it'd be the highlight of your professional career. But if you're looking for vertical mobility or you're looking to move into people management and leadership, you're probably more likely to get that at a consulting firm or a vendor than you are at a law firm.
Yeah, and it matters how entrenched the leadership is at a firm, right? Firms, there's a certain degree of stability there. That's been my experience. And so like I stayed in my 2 law firm jobs for 10 years. So anybody who worked beneath me, like we had succession planning and all that, but I wasn't just going anywhere very quickly, so if you want to become the director, you come in as a PM, it might be a few years.
All right, last question. Are certifications from Relativity or other organizations as valuable as in the past?
Yeah, they're very valuable. I mean, look, what a certification says to an employer is that you've invested in yourself. 9 times out of 10, the employee is actually paying for their own certification. So I think that sense of initiative and self-initiative is incredibly valuable, regardless of what certification you get. To some extent, it doesn't matter, right? And like OneTrust and BrainSpace, they were giving away their certifications free in 2021. And it was a great marketing campaign, a great way for people to get some extra knowledge and training as a result. So I think any certification that you get has absolute value. Now, does it have the same increase in monetary compensation value that it did a few years ago? The answer is no. It used to be that if you had your RCA, you'd get $10,000 to $15,000 more than the person who didn't. That's not the case anymore. There are too many of you out there. Now, if you're an expert or a master, you got to hit those distinctions in the Relativity ecosystem to really command more financial compensation.
Although you might get a great paying job at Relativity if you have all those.
Indeed.
Okay, second to last question, just to build on that. What certifications are the best to have in making yourself more valuable?
Let me answer that one. So
I mean, look, there is no other one in eDiscovery that's really considered, the credible in the space is ACEDS. And if you don't have your CEDS yet, you should get your EDX. And in the technology side, and that's it for non-vocational stuff, right? In eDiscovery. For technology specific stuff, You've got the relativity ecosystem of certs. You've got the reveal ecosystem of certs. You've got the disco ecosystem of certs.
Everybody's got one now.
Everlaw's ecosystem of certs. Like, go get them all, guys. Because here's what I'll leave everybody listening to with. It used to be an only relativity ecosystem out there, and it is a new world order. And the flavor of the day is to have everything available to customers and to be technology flexible and agnostic if you're a third-party vendor, which is where most of the jobs are. So my advice is go get them all. Get them all, make yourself a quadruple threat, certify yourself in everything, and then nobody can say boo.
Fair point. But
Right.
ACEDS is the one certification that actually spans the entire industry and doesn't focus on a particular product.
So
Just saying.
On that note, I will leave us with this. Mike, Jared, and myself, again, will be at the UF Law eDiscovery Conference. It is a free conference, virtually online. We've got 2 days. It was expanded over the last few years. Attendees have been asking for a longer conference, and it has been expanded to 2 days. Jared will be doing some great storytelling, and Mike is talking about what ESI protocols.
No, proportionality.
Proportionality. Mike will be talking about proportionality. We definitely, it will be have CLEs in multi-jurisdictions for attorneys and paralegals, so feel free to join that.
Legal week.
Legal Week, we will be there. ACEDS as at Legal Week, we have a booth. Come visit us, come say hi, come take pictures with the team. We will also have a walk run, which is through Central Park, led by Ari Kaplan and Joy Morale of Joy is of PAR. And then we will also have our community cocktail event. If you are in New York City for Legal Week, please come visit us, come say hi. We would love to see everybody. I'd love to meet everybody. Lastly, if I don't say this, our customer service team would get mad. We have our career center online. There's lots of great job postings there, but also feel free to reach out to Jared and his team. They do an amazing job and they work closely with us. So if you don't have any of our info, just reach out and I'll be happy to share it with you. We will see you. I guess we'll see you guys next quarter. And in the meantime, take care and we'll send out recordings for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Be good.